Welcome to Built Through Time, your shortcut to being well-informed without feeling overwhelmed. Today, we're taking a deep dive into one of America's most iconic, and maybe one of its most complex monuments, Mount Rushmore National Memorial. We're going to journey through its incredible origin story, sort of peel back the layers of its, well, sheer audacious construction, uncover some surprising human stories behind the carving, and then we'll explore the multifaceted perspectives that shape its meaning today. I mean, it's a landmark that symbolizes national pride for many, right? But for others, it represents a really deeply contested history with Native American communities.
Mount Rushmore truly is a study in contrast. On one hand, it's this undeniable testament to monumental human ambition, engineering prowess. Yet it also serves as a focal point for understanding vastly different viewpoints on American history, land, and identity. What's truly remarkable, I think, is how much deep history and, well, ongoing discussion is literally carved into that mountainside for us to explore together.
So where did this extraordinary idea, this colossal monument, even begin? Believe it or not, it started with a historian named Doan Robinson. He was with the South Dakota Historical Society.
But his main goal really was about the economy.
Exactly. He wanted to boost the state's economy, which was struggling quite a bit in the early 20th century. His idea was attracting tourists to the rugged beauty of the Black Hills, and he envisioned carving a massive monument right into the granite cliffs.
It was, well, ambitious, almost unheard of for South Dakota at the time. Robinson knew he needed a sculptor with a truly grand vision, and the technical skill to match. That's when he brought in Gutzon Borglum, an American sculptor already known for large-scale projects.
Borglum, okay.
Yeah, and Borglum meticulously scouted the area. He looked around and ultimately chose Mount Rushmore. He saw its towering granite face as, well, not just visually commanding, but also geologically stable. So it seemed like the most suitable canvas for his monumental art.
And his first idea was even bigger, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Interestingly, Borglum's initial vision was even more expansive. He wanted to carve the president's figures down to their waists, full busts, essentially.
Wow.
But, the realities of funding, the sheer scale, the limitations of time, it meant they would ultimately only complete the heads.
And Borglum's choices for who went up there were just as deliberate.
Absolutely. He settled on 4 presidents, each chosen to embody a pivotal chapter in American history.
Okay, so let's break that down. First, George Washington.
Right, Washington, representing the birth of the nation, its foundational principles, liberty, independence, the start of it all.
Makes sense. Then Thomas Jefferson. Why him specifically?
Borglum chose Jefferson because his 1803 Louisiana purchase nearly doubled the size of the young U.S., and that purchase included the very land that would later become South Dakota, so a direct connection.
Okay. It was massive expansion, really reshaped the country's future.
Definitely. And the narrative continues with Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was chosen to represent the preservation of the Union during the brutal Civil War, a period that really tested the nation's ability to remain united. So his presence symbolizes, endurance, resilience.
The American experiment holding together.
Exactly. And finally, Theodore Roosevelt.
His inclusion is interesting. There was some politics involved there, too.
Yeah, his inclusion was, in part, a suggestion by President Calvin Coolidge. Coolidge actually insisted on having at least 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat represented.
Okay. Party balance even on the mountain?
Kinda, yeah. But Roosevelt's legacy was vast, too. His introduction of the National Park Service, his conservation efforts, also his trust-busting aimed at corporate power. He spearheaded the Panama Canal, even won a Nobel Peace Prize.
Right, for mediating the end of the Russo-Japanese War. He really embodied a period of significant American expansion and influence.
He certainly did.
So reflecting on these choices, it's clear this was way more than just sculpting faces onto a mountain. It feels like a deliberate attempt by Borglum to etch a specific narrative of American progress, maybe destiny, into the very bedrock.
It absolutely does. And it forces us to ask, whose story gets carved into history like that? Whose is overlooked in such grand public statements?
Definitely something to think about. Okay, now let's shift focus. Let's talk about the sheer audacity of how they actually built this thing. The first drills bit into the granite, you said, October 4, 1927.
That's the start date. And what followed was a grueling 14-year endeavor. Work officially stopped on October 31st, 1941, which was just before the U.S. entered World War II.
14 years, that's a long time. And the human effort involved.
Oh, it's remarkable. Especially when you consider it wasn't automated. Not like today. It was nearly 400 men and women. A diverse crew, really.
Yeah.
Drillers, blacksmiths, housekeepers, even young call boys who'd relay messages up and down the mountain face.
Wow. And the conditions must have been brutal.
Incredibly harsh. Blazing heat in the summer, bitter, wind-swept cold in the winter. And imagine this. Each morning, they'd climb 700 stairs just to punch in.
700 stairs.
Yeah, then they'd be lowered 500 feet over the mountain face in what were called bosun chairs.
Which were basically just open seats.
Pretty much. A simple open seat suspended by thin steel cables, often swaying, I imagine.
Terrifying.
Gave them an unparalleled view, I guess, but yeah, terrifying. And many of these workers admitted they were uneasy with heights.
I bet.
But you have to remember, this was during the Great Depression. Any steady job, no matter how dangerous, was a lifeline.
That really puts it in perspective, the courage, the dedication. It's hard to fathom. There's that great anecdote you mentioned about what the workers said.
Right, it captures the spirit perfectly.
Well.
When visitors asked what they did, one worker might just say, I run a jackhammer. Simple fact. Another may be focused on the need, I earn $8 a day.
Just trying to get by.
Exactly. But a third, who really grasped the scale of it all, would proudly say, I am helping to create a memorial.
That gives me chills. And the safety record, that's astonishing.
It really is. Here's the truly amazing fact. Despite the incredibly dangerous work, 90% of the carving was done using dynamite.
90%.
Not a single fatality occurred during the entire 14 years of construction.
Incredible. That speaks volumes about their skill, the planning.
Meticulous planning, careful execution. Absolutely. And the innovation involved was fascinating too. The powder men, they were like artists with explosives, cutting and setting precise dynamite charges to remove huge chunks of rock, often getting within inches of the final surface.
Just inches with dynamite.
Yeah. Then, for the final detail, the last 3 to 6 inches, they use a technique called honeycombing. This meant drilling holes very, very close together, like perforating the rock.
To weaken it for hand removal.
Exactly. Made it easier to chip away carefully. And Borglum also invented this ingenious pointing machine. It used plumb bobs and measurements to scale his smaller plaster models up to the massive mountain face.
So that's how they got the proportions right.
It's incredible accuracy. And after the honeycombing, workers used hand facers, or bumper tools, to smooth the surface. The goal was as smooth as a sidewalk.
Wow. And you had that funny story about the rocks too, the souvenir.
Oh yeah, the honeycombing anecdote. Visitors often wanted a piece of the rock, a souvenir. So the hoist operator, apparently quite the character, would pretend he was holding a piece for a buddy.
Plain hard to get.
Totally. And after some convincing, some back and forth, he'd reluctantly sell it for $6. Then, as soon as the visitor was gone, he'd apparently call up the mountain, totally deadpan, "Boys, send out another one."
That's brilliant. It just shows the human element in all this grandeur.
Absolutely. It humanizes the whole massive undertaking. Now, the carving itself, it progressed systematically. Washington's face was first, dedicated in 1930.
Okay.
Jefferson was started next, but they hit a snag. Poor rock quality. They actually had to blast his partially carved face off the mountain.
Blast it off. Oh, wow.
And restart it to Washington's left. That version was dedicated in 1936.
Quite a setback.
Then came Abraham Lincoln, dedicated in 1937. And finally, Theodore Roosevelt in 1939.
And Borglum's son played a big role, didn't he? Lincoln Borglum.
A crucial role, especially later on. He started young, just 21, as an unpaid pointer, worked his way up to assistant sculptor and superintendent. And when his father, Gutzon, unexpectedly passed away in March 1941.
Right before it was finished.
Exactly. Lincoln stepped up. He oversaw the final drilling, brought the monument to completion by October of that year.
So he really finished his father's work.
He did. But Gutzon Borglum's vision, even then, was grander than what we see.
What else did he want?
He envisioned this magnificent hall of records behind Lincoln's head. An 80 by 100-foot vault carved deep into the granite.
A vault? For what?
Meant to house crucial historical documents. The Constitution, Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Like a time capsule for future generations.
Did they ever build it?
Well, he only managed to carve out about 70 feet before he died, so unfinished. But his ambition wasn't totally forgotten. Much later, in 1998, a titanium vault was finally installed in that unfinished hall, filled with 16 porcelain enamel panels containing the text of those key documents.
So in a way, his idea was realized just differently. Hidden away.
Quietly, yeah. A hidden corner of the memorial.
Okay, so we've talked about the vision, the construction, an incredible achievement. But as we reflect, it's crucial to acknowledge that Mount Rushmore isn't just an engineering feat. It's also, well, steeped in deep controversy, particularly around Borglum himself and its location, which raises a really important question, doesn't it? Can a symbol of national pride simultaneously carry a difficult, maybe even painful past?
That's the core of it, really. And what's critical here is understanding Borglum himself. There's just no denying his genius as an artist and engineer. The monument is proof of that.
However,
historical accounts reveal his deeply troubling white supremacist leanings.
that's difficult to hear about the creator of such an icon.
It is.
Yeah.
Sources show he harbored strong prejudices. He expressed distrust of Native Americans, made anti-Semitic remarks. He was also known to have ties to the Ku Klux Klan.
Really? The KKK?
Yes. And they even provided some funding for his previous Confederate memorial project at Stone Mountain, Georgia. That's actually where he honed many of the massive carving techniques he later used at Rushmore.
Wow, okay.
This isn't just, a historical footnote. It presents a profound challenge. How do we view these national symbols? Can a monument truly represent liberty and unity when its creator held such problematic ideologies?
That immediately brings us to another crucial perspective, one that's often overlooked, I think, that of the Native American nation.
Absolutely vital.
For many indigenous peoples, especially the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, the Black Hills or Apahasapa aren't just mountains. They're sacred land, central to their spiritual practices, their creation stories, their cultural identity.
Deeply sacred.
So the monument, for them, or at least for many, is seen as a profound desecration of that sacred site, and a painful symbol of their devastating history with the U.S. government, the illegal seizure of their ancestral lands.
Yeah, and to connect this to the bigger picture, you have to look at the history. The Black Hills were explicitly recognized as Lakota territory by the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868. Signed, sealed.
The treaty, okay.
But just 9 years later, after gold was discovered there, the U.S. government seized the land, completely violating the treaty.
Just like that, because of gold.
Pretty much. And that act of broken trust, it continues to resonate very deeply today. The American Indian movement, for example, has actively protested the monument for decades.
I remember hearing about protests there.
And in 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court actually awarded the Sioux Nation about $600 million in compensation for that illegal seizure.
$600 million? That's a lot of money.
It is. But the Sioux Nation famously refused the payment. Their statement was unequivocal. The Black Hills are not for sale.
Wow. Not for sale.
Their stance is clear. You can't put a price tag on sacred land. And many Native people feel the monument portrays these U.S. presidents in a very unproblematic, almost glorified way. It doesn't acknowledge the immense challenges, the injustices, the violence faced by indigenous peoples throughout American history, often because of policies enacted by figures like those on the mountain.
So it tells a very incomplete story from their perspective.
Exactly. They've consistently asked for the visitor center to include comprehensive displays illustrating their history, their ongoing connection to the Black Hills, and also to recognize the region primarily as a place for quiet reflection, which, is often disrupted by the huge amount of tourism the monument attracts.
Right. So despite these really profound historical tensions, these ongoing issues, Mount Rushmore is undeniably a massive tourist magnet. Millions come every year. It's fascinating to look at its economic footprint today. It adds another layer, another lens to view its impact.
The numbers really are quite staggering. In 2023, just to give you context, across 400 national parks nationwide, there were 325.5 million visitors total. Mount Rushmore alone welcomed 2.43 million visits.
2.5 million almost.
Yeah, and that figure continues to exceed pre-pandemic levels. It's bouncing back strong. July is always the busiest month. Over 624,000 visits just in July 2023. And get this, over 63,000 visits just during the Independence Day celebrations around the 4th.
Huge crowds.
To give you some perspective, the total number of people visiting Mount Rushmore in a year exceeds the combined population of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wyoming.
That's mind-blowing. More people visit the mountain than live in those 3 states combined.
Yep.
So what does this mean for the local communities there in South Dakota? The economic impact must be huge.
It's truly substantial. In 2022, those 2.44 million visitors spent an astounding $385.6 million in the local area.
Wow, almost $400 million.
And that spending wasn't just, a drop in the bucket. It supported nearly 5,700 jobs and generated over $500 million in total economic output for the region, around $551 million.
$500 million. That's critical for the local economy.
Absolutely critical driver.
Okay.
And over 71% of visitors stayed in local lodging. hotels, motels, and for more than half of them, Mount Rushmore was the primary reason for their visit to South Dakota.
So it really is the main draw. It just highlights, again, these complex layers, doesn't it? The immense benefit for some, the deep contention for others, all centered on this one landmark.
Precisely.
We've journeyed through quite a bit here. The audacious vision that birthed Mount Rushmore, the incredible human endeavor required to carve it, and the complex, sometimes conflicting historical narratives that are all part of its enduring legacy. It truly is a monument that seems to embody both immense American pride and, for many, a deep historical pain.
And this really brings us to a crucial question, something for you, the listener, to maybe ponder long after our deep dive ends. How do we as a society reconcile the monumental achievement of Mount Rushmore? I mean, the artistic and engineering marvel of it. How do we reconcile that with its contested origins and its ongoing, deeply significant meaning for all people who hold the Black Hills sacred?
Yeah, how can we appreciate its grandeur while also fully acknowledging, fully integrating the multifaceted, sometimes really uncomfortable history it represents?
Not an easy question.
No, definitely not. We hope this deep dive into Mount Rushmore has given you a richer, perhaps more nuanced understanding of this iconic site, maybe sparked some new thoughts, maybe even inspired you to explore more on your own. Thank you for joining us on Built Through Time.